Welcome to the Tarot Coven Cast. Real people, real talk, real magic. Hello out there, lovely listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Tarot Coven Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jasmine.
I'm Jekanovia.
And I'm Jessie.
And this time on the show, we're continuing on our journey through the suits of the tarot. Today, we find ourselves floating through the realm of air as we contemplate the thoughts and beliefs that make up our mental beings in the suit of swords. We'll be talking about the energy of the sword suit overall, outlining some correspondences and misconceptions, and then we'll take a closer look at the cards from Ace through 10. But first, we're going to do a little round of tarot this or that, which has been inspired by Twin Moon Tarot, that Instagram handle, Twin Moon Tarot. She has these fantastic templates on her Instagram account that you can kind of play around with in your stories and answer fun questions. And I think that she has them in her highlights on her account, so go check her out. But we're going to do just a quick round here. So you girls ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so majors or minors? I'm going to have to go with majors.
Minors for me.
Ooh.
I'm also going to go with majors.
Oh, wow. I could have sworn we were all three going to go minors.
Well, real quick, tell us why you went minors.
It's just more like everyday, mundane. Like, I just like that it's real life stuff. It's not so much, not that I don't appreciate the spiritual side of the majors, but yeah, it's more practical.
Yeah, I getcha. All right. Wands or swords? I'm going to go swords.
Wands.
Wands for me.
Pentacles or cups? I'm going to go cups.
Pentacles.
Pentacles.
Kings or queens? I'm going queens.
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 Woo!
3 for 3.
Yeah. Pages or knights? Pages.
Yeah, I got to go pages.
I'm going with knights.
I knew that would be your answer, Jess, for sure.
Yes. I'm too much of a busy body, like never stop. That those knights are my kindred spirits.
Yes. All right. The Fool or the World? I'm going the Fool.
The World.
The World.
The Hermit or the Star? The Star.
I'm going the Hermit.
I'm going Hermit.
Ooh.
The Hermit has the star and the lantern, though. So technically, I went for both.
Oh, wow. Nice loophole.
Yeah. See? That's what I do.
Death or the Tower? Gotta go Death.
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 Nice.
Always death.
Yes. The Sun or the Moon? The Moon.
The Moon.
The sun.
Shocker.
Surprise.
Shock. I know. For all those listeners out there. Sorry if you lost that bet.
Oh my gosh, I really hope listeners are taking bets. That would be so fun. Let us know if you are.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I hope they don't lose anything on this.
Well, yeah,
Right.
I mean, just a friendly bet. A friendly bet. Just for bragging rights, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so reversals or nah? And I'm going nah.
Yes, I do reversals.
Reversals.
All right, do you stick to one deck or do you switch it up? I'm definitely a gal that switches it up.
Oh, I switch.
Switch it up.
And are you doing a ritual first or are you just drawing cards? This one's tough. I feel like I do both, but if I had to say one, which I do, that's the point of the game, I'm going to go just draw cards.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go just draw cards. Yep.
I will consider my little breath work, heart taps. I think that's kind of ritual realm.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go with
Yeah.
ritual.
I can agree.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, final question. Are you doing an overhand shuffle or the riffle and bridge? Ooh, this changes for me from deck to deck, but most often I'm just doing an overhand shuffle.
I think I just do overhand shuffle, but I don't really know what a riffle is. So full disclosure.
Oh, it's like casino style.
Yeah.
Oh, that's when you like mix it all up on the table. Oh,
No,
I do kind
no,
of-
where you're actually take your thumbs and you with two, your deck
when you
split
do,
in
like-
two.
Yeah, you split the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Overhand, because they'll go everywhere if I try riffling.
Not much of a gambler, are you there?
No,
At your
not at all.
Poker playing. I am an overhand shuffle for the most part. Yes.
Nice. Oh, that was so much fun. I loved that.
That
It was fun. And just another shout out for Twin Moon Tarot. That profile feed is so funny.
So much fun.
She has the best memes and the best reels and so much tarot knowledge. So definitely follow Twin Moon Tarot.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And
we endorse.
oh yeah, big time. I don't
Highly
know.
endorse.
I mean, listeners that know what we're talking about will remember. I mean, you know that she does like the tiny hands video, like the pull of the day with the tiny hands. And there was that one day where she just posted that the tiny hands was getting a manicure that day and having some self-care. And that was one of the best things I've ever seen come across my Instagram.
Okay, did I dream it? But like the next time she posted, it had nail polish on, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tell me I'm not kidding. Okay, I thought maybe I dreamed it because I haven't seen any
Yes.
since.
So Jana, we are huge fans. Thank you for continuing to share your magic with the world
And the
through
belly
all
laughs.
of your humor and tarot knowledge.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, so fun. All right. Well, let's dive into these swords. So let's kick things off with just some keywords and energies of the swords overall. I guess I can walk us through that. So thoughts, brain chemistry, decisions, analysis, communication, conflict, mental processes, acuity, wit, criticism, ideas, and beliefs. And then how are we... Sorry, who wrote this? Do you guys want to take it? Or did I write it?
Oh yeah, that's my little note. But
cool.
really just how are we being called to use our voice or to use our truth? And so it's kind of the action of picking up the sword. What does that mean in any of our numerology that we're going to go over? It's like, how is that sword being used in our day-to-day? And since the connections are, like you said, to our thoughts and communication, really our truth and how we communicate it to the world.
Lovely.
That's yummy. Well, a new concept for me, actually, with the Suit of Swords has been uncomfortable truths. So it brings up a lot of things that maybe we don't want to face or talk about or think about. And I think that's why I prickle a lot when a sword comes up. It's my second least favorite suit.
And cups is your least favorite? Yes. Okay.
Yes. And also expression and how we interact intellectually with any given situation or relationship.
Ooh, I love those points from you guys. Those are great. So with the astrology, we're dealing with the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And the sort of seasonal leader of the swords would be fall. So that's also, Mabon, Libra season, the fall equinox, that sort of thing. And of course, I'm going to get into the decans as we move through each card.
Wonderful. So chakras are next. And this one, so obviously, or maybe not obviously, but for me, throat chakra comes to mind, right? Because we are speaking our truth. This is kind of our voice, who we are, this identity that we are vocalizing. And I do feel that very much within the swords, but I also was thinking this is a lot of third eye chakra energy because if you're thinking about your mental state and kind of what's going on in the brain and the thoughts that we're being presented with and how we have to evaluate that. And that's so much about the intuitive side, also how we're playing against any ego, logical brain thinking. And so I think both of those connect well. And, they are in line with each other. And so even just the flow of third eye, let's say that's open and spinning beautifully, like you'd want the throat. The idea is the throat is also open and spinning so that this flow of energy is aligned and, kind of easily going. So a lot of times we may get stuck in mental thoughts, whether it is anxiety or just not trusting ourselves in our decisions or just struggling with our truth, and how that connects also to what we are feeling comfortable and safe with vocalizing or being able to stand up for ourselves. And so I do think those both connect beautifully. And yeah, we see how the healthy side of that shows up in our cards with swords, and also maybe the more closed or blocked versions of throat and third eye within the sword suits as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. That was a great way to kind of marry the two together.
Oh, thank you. Well, and it's trusting ourselves to then speak it. So we'll often have the thought, but then we either shut it down or we want to stay safe, or we just don't feel like we have the power or the safe space to speak it. And so they are very connected. The more we speak our truth, the more we are honoring our intuition and our gifts that we have to know and connect with ourselves. And so, yeah, I think they just are really connected. And yeah, I loved thinking about this. And I hadn't really applied it to swords in the past, to be honest. But I think even as we go through this, it's like, okay, how would this look in my day to day if I'm getting the Ace of Swords? Well, to me, that is very much an open throat chakra. That's like, yes, I have this. And so,
yeah, that's really cool to think about. And also, I mean, not sad, but just like interesting to think about. I think a lot of people probably have a very blocked throat chakra. And yeah, if we are just honoring that a little bit more, like what we need to be saying, what our truths are, and just how much better those would be flowing if that was the case. So, wow, we're just starting out real powerful tonight.
Right.
Yeah,
I know.
right?
And even like, let's just take a moment too to honor those who have stepped outside maybe what was acceptable, however they were raised, to come into this more mystical, metaphysical, esoteric, connected side of themselves. That isn't always supported because people are fearful. And, we have the programming, whether it's through organized religion or just whatever. Historically, it's just always been like, you can't, if you're not considered normal or like following the others, if you step out of line, you're immediately squashed down. And so I think generationally, we're working through a lot of closed, blocked chakra energy where people are trying to find their voice again and, feel empowered to speak. And I, for my own experience, I did have a lot of throat chakra blockage around my love and working with the tarot because of how I was raised. I've done a lot of work with that, and having come through that, and I had help with, Reiki and, of course, supportive communities and friends like yourselves. But where that has over the last couple of years completely gone away and healed itself. And I'm thankful for that, but also knowing that this is something that I think a lot of our listeners and people within this community are dealing with.
Oh, absolutely. I would be surprised, especially people in this community, right? Because it's still not, as much as it's gained popularity, it's still not widely
There's still a stigma.
Yes.
Yeah.
This whole conversation I don't know if you guys know the song. It's called Say by John Mayer. Do you guys remember that song?
Oh, it's a great
Maybe
song.
if I heard it, I can't quite remember it right now.
Say what you need to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
of
Say
course.
what you need to say.
Yeah.
I just this whole conversation. It's like that's the theme song now playing in the back of my mind.
Yes. Oh. Open that throat. If you need to, turn on John Mayer and just say what you need to say.
I guess I'm going to have to insert some
even if
John
your hands
Mayer
are
here.
shaking. Yep, got to do it.
All right, well, let's quickly chat about a few misconceptions. For me, I just think like this is not a suit of doom and gloom. I think a lot of people get a little scared by the swords, maybe when they're first reading or maybe even further down the line. But and I mean, the swords, there are some cards, and I mean, particularly in some decks, they look even scarier than in like the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. But wow, I can't believe I just called it the Rider-Waite-Smith. I have never done that. It is the Smith-Waite. Sorry.
Smith-Waite.
Anyways.
I'm trying to get in that habit too.
That was just so weird. I've never done that. But yeah, I just think the more I've worked with tarot and tried to see it just from, even the ways that Jesse was talking about with chakras, like I just think that the swords have a lot of love to give us, and they're not as scary as they maybe seem, you know? And I just think that maybe this isn't necessarily about the swords, but kind of the conversation overall. I think when we get swords, it's always a good reminder that thoughts aren't always facts, and that swords can help us kind of examine our thinking and move us away from being fearful of our kind of mental processes.
I think that's one of the best lessons. As soon as you can learn that not all thoughts are facts,
Yeah.
where is the truth there? You will be so much happier and confident and just moving in your truth because, yes, like we've talked about in the past with brains and our ego, it's like the only job is to keep you safe. So it's going to, anything that's coming at you that is transformative or new is very scary. And so you will get all sorts of untruths coming at you. So being able to identify what is your truth, personal truth, and what is actually just the brain or ego saying, nope, we're not going to do this because that's scary. Yes.
Exactly.
Being open to that is huge.
Life lessons from the Tarot Coven Cast. I think too, the sword, like just the way you were just describing it, I mean, shadow work, maybe that's why everybody's so afraid of the swords, is because it brings up a lot of your shadow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for years, I felt like the swords were really like cold, like there's no emotion and no feeling, but I've learned that they can represent like the movement of emotion and feeling. So when it's locked up, it's that initial movement of it or the transference of it. It kind of brings it into like your external life, like the element. It's the element that carries emotion into the physical. So it transforms, water into earth kind of thing.
Yeah. Even thinking about swords as the symbol or what it actually is. If you think of the other elements, what we've got a wand. So you could do some damage with a wand for sure. But, cups, pentacles, what are you going to throw them at something? Your sword, the sword can
drink
do
in
damage.
The face.
It can create. Take that pentacle. But yeah, like thinking this is a very powerful instrument. Yes. To be used as a weapon or to be used as something not weaponizing, but it's like this can create major change pretty quickly. So I guess seeing the sword in that way, it's like, ooh, yeah, the work is here to be done. And you can actually clear a lot out if you're willing to stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that energy of like just cutting to the quick.
Yep.
Love it. All right. So talking about the Ace of Swords. So some of the key terms are clarity of thought, breakthrough, new thoughts and ideas, a sharpened and focused vision, a buzzing mind, a new awareness, a truth uncovered, a fresh perspective.
And then with the astrology, as with all the aces, this is just the root of air or the essence of air. And so I was kind of seeing this as the seed of thought or the origin of ideas. And it's kind of something that's intangible until you channel it, until you're ready to sort of marry that intuition with speaking your truth, right?
So good. So when the Ace of Swords is presented to you, maybe questions that you can play with. How can I open my channel to receive messages? Maybe for a prompt, you can write down all those ideas that are coming in. Maybe what's a new way to look at the situation, and what have I just discovered about myself? And I love the Ace of Swords. Like the visual of it is very inspiring. It's very empowering. I think out of most of the aces, like for me, it's just very like, it's like now is the time. Like, there's some real amplification on how it's being presented. And even the colors in this card are different than the other aces. And it's just so, it's very provoking.
Yeah, and there's something about, I mean, at least in the Smith Waite, like with the crown and the wreaths and everything, there's something already really victorious about it. So just feels like you're off to a good start.
Yes.
I see those as kind of like seaweed. I always get like this Excalibur feel, like it's coming up out of the water, even though I know it doesn't have anything to do with water, but that's just what comes to mind for me.
You know what? I think the swords actually have, I mean, yeah, it's the element of air, but there's so much water. I mean, actually visually in the suit of swords, I think they're pretty tightly connected.
That's a true story. That's very true. And I mean, if you're going into the Two of Swords, like there's water right behind her. So maybe I like it.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. Interesting. It is that right hand, right? So left is our receiving, the right is the giving. So it's like giving you this nucleic action, like, okay, here's your idea, here's your thing, what truth are you going to discover about this? So being able to receive it that way. Ooh, love the aces. All right. Well, moving into twos then, key terms about meditation, maybe bringing balance between logic and emotion, choices, considering something. I love the note here about being a mini hanged one or high priestess. So having options there and reflecting, even that pause, right? Yeah. And then Jacknovia, I love your thoughts on the two.
Yeah, I call this the shit or get off the pot card. So it's like, make a choice already. Because in the Smith-Waite deck, you see the woman, I mean, she's not tied up. She's got a blindfold on and she's holding onto the swords. So a lot of times I read that, especially if it's in reversed, it's like she's sitting there by choice. She's choosing to be there. She could just put a sword down, take off the blindfold and make her decision. But so yeah, that's how I see it a lot of the time.
So with the astrology, this is the moon in Libra and the title is Peace. And the moon is our emotions and intuition. It's our receptivity. Sometimes it's the side of us that we only show to those that we're close with. And Libra is a sign of balance, equality, peace, harmony. It's social, intellectual, diplomatic, idealistic, and it can be also indecisive and people-pleasing. So together, I think this means intuition and awareness. We are seeing both sides of the coin from the emotional and logical places. We're creating some kind of order while we're in this more meditative space. And I think it's also about bringing sensitivity to the thought process or even finding balance amidst change. Because again, Libra is the sign of balance and the moon is constantly changing. And then Libra is a cardinal sign, and so it does want to take action, but I think in this case, it means it's a very measured and thoughtful action. But as I said, it can also mean indecisiveness. So this card could be exactly as Jekanovia has said, shit or get off the pot. Like, I mean, there is frustration here because action is desired, but maybe we haven't taken enough time to kind of consider what the outcomes might be. So that's why we are in this meditative space. Maybe that's like one of those vicious cycles. So yeah, movement might be required.
That was a lot. So much good information.
Well, I hope not too much.
No, it's just so good. And I get lost in it. It's wonderful.
Oh, cool.
So some of the questions that we put together for the Two of Swords is, what are the pros and cons of the decision that I'm facing? Am I giving too much weight to either my emotions or my thoughts? What truth am I choosing not to face? And what belief is it that, or a thought that's causing me to hesitate? So what I suggest, if someone is facing a decision, one of the best readings that I think that I've come up with that helps me a lot is, I call it the coin flip reading. I made it up based on a quote by Arnold Rothstein. It's the one that says, flip a coin. When it's in the air, you'll know which side you're hoping for. Mm. So, because I mean, we always internally, we know what we want or what should happen. And sometimes we're just kind of stuck there, right? So what I do is I pull out the Death card and the Sun card. So the Death card represents a very hard no, and the Sun card is a solid yes. So I set them face up side by side on a table, and then I choose. I don't pull it out of the deck, but I pick a card for like my two different options that I'm trying to decide on, that I feel represent what I'm going for. And I'll make a note of it too, so I can't, change it around in my mind after to make it fit my narrative. So you write it down and write down why and what parts of the card, you think illustrates it. So then you're going to shuffle the deck, and then you're going to place them one at a time. So one underneath the Death card, one underneath the Sun card, and back and forth until you've got two separate piles of the whole deck. Okay. And then, so what you're going to do at that point is you're going to take a minute and kind of feel your body's reaction, because the chances are one of them is going to be in one pile and one of them is going to be in the other. So which one are you hoping to find under the Death card, for instance? And write down why. and the same with the Sun card. And then one by one, take the cards and, it'd start with the Death. I usually start with the Death card, and I take all the cards in that pile. And when I come across the one or both or none of the ones that I had designated for specific choices, I set it aside. And then again, if you feel disappointment, that maybe that's what you were hoping for. So I know it sounds confusing, but it's really helpful, I find, because you basically make the decision yourself.
Yes, but you still get to play around with the cards and have this whole thing. I really like this. And I think if you think of it, I mean, actually, we have a while until this episode comes out, but it would be cool if we maybe made like a little video of this spread or something. That would be fun to demonstrate it.
Oh, I love that idea. This is such a cool spread. Is it even a spread? But it's just, just a different way to work with your cards. Yeah. And it's including that emotional body intelligence. I mean, almost like that muscle testing where you're like, how is it feeling? Tuning into that and having the guidance of the Death and the Sun card just makes it more clear.
Yeah. I love it.
Again, because I think deep down we know what we want. It's just sometimes we find reasons not to admit it or whatever. So.
Totally.
Well, should we move on to the threes?
I guess.
Yeah, I know. I think collectively this is the least liked card of this entire deck. Is the Three of Swords.
It's so sad. I feel so bad for it.
Unless you're Elena.
Yeah.
Who does have an affinity for the Three of Swords. So.
Yeah. She's strange. We love her, but she's strange. So, some of the key terms for the Three of Swords is pain, sorrow, hurt by words or beliefs, heartache, neglecting your emotions, tending to your heart, taking some time to tend to any pain you have in your heart, unburdening the heart through communication, having difficult conversations. Maybe there's a need for that. Messages or news that isn't what you'd hoped for, disappointment, rose-colored glasses coming off. So that kind of vibe.
I really like that last one. It's like just seeing the truth of a situation, right? And you kind of talked about that at the beginning too, just facing those hard truths. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming to terms with it.
Yeah. It's so much about just that kind of like every day we have these things that break our hearts a little bit, right? So I think that's one thing that kind of was really obvious to me as I was working more with this. It's like this, maybe because we know every day there's just these things that are disappointing, and it's actually more, I guess, connected to life and our growth than we want to, I guess, give it credit for.
Yeah, I agree. So for the astrology, we've got Saturn in Libra, and this is where Saturn finds its exaltation, which, as I've talked about before, it's like Saturn is a special guest when it visits Libra. So Saturn is the planet of boundaries, time, authority and responsibility, discipline. Libra, again, it's that balance, equality, harmony. And so I think this is taking a serious look at our relationship with our thoughts. It's pain is inevitable, and we kind of have to take it in, hold it in our hearts, deal with it, and let it go. We're acknowledging that grief takes time. I also think that for Saturn's part, it's making the limitations visible and then pushing us to find clarity, that's the swords, in order to bring ourselves back into balance. There's Libra. And we're accepting the limitations that we've set on ourselves, making space for that pain, and then allowing harmony to reign once more. And my last point here is, like, have we been pleasing someone else at the expense of our own heart? Going back to that very people-pleasing energy of Libra.
Ooh, that's a really interesting way to view the Three of Swords. And I loved just the connection of transformation and back to balance. And then, we either choose to continue to live that story, which is breaking our hearts over and over, or we step out of the cycle of whatever that is. And, the Libra balance is always there when we're ready to accept it, acknowledge it, and move in that direction. Wow. Awesome astro connections, Jazz. And
looking at these astro connections have made me think about the cards. So, I mean, not every single one of them, but a lot of them in such a new light. It's been so fascinating.
It's really empowering, really. Like, to look at the Three of Swords, it's not generally something that makes you feel very good, but looking at it like, okay, have we been pleasing someone else at the expense of our heart? That puts the ball in our court. That empowers us to make the change.
Yes, it's not victim mentality anymore. We have to be taking responsibility for where we're at and our heart. I mean, no matter what's happened to us in our life or our background or the programming that's been put on us, ultimately, we do have all of the power to create what we want. And so we may have to pick up pieces there, but we have the ability to do so and create change. So that's that last statement. Yeah. How have we been pleasing someone else at the expense of our own heart? I mean, that could be a parent. It's like, oh, wait, these aren't actually this isn't my stuff. I'm going to just take this off now. Yeah. What do we want?
So good.
Yes. So Jasmine, you created an awesome spread that we're going to share through a link in the show notes. But would you mind taking us through that for the questions?
Yeah, sure. So I think I created this at a time when actually both Elena and I were pulling the Three of Swords a lot. And I was like, all right, let me dig deeper here. And then so I put this together. So the questions are, what triggered this emotional blockage? What needs to be communicated to release the blockage? How might I best communicate this? What does my heart need me to know about this experience? And what next steps can I take to heal these wounds?
Wow. That's like, where was that spread when my heart was being broken so many times? But just to have the insight and to be willing to go deeper with those cards and the Three of Swords, Three of Hearts,
Yeah.
That poor heart
those
on
prompts
that
will
card.
take you deep.
That's awesome. Yeah. One more question. If this is about bad news, why do you find it disappointing? What expectations were you holding, and were they fair, justified, or realistic? So going back to the story that maybe is playing, is it truth? Is it just something that our brain is telling us? So there's some good discernment practices that can come when looking at the card that way. Thank you, Jekanovia, for that prompt.
That's a juicy one.
Of course.
Ooh. Yes. Okay. So, after all of that trauma, we're tired. We need to go inward and just take a break. So let's talk about Four of Swords in this way. What can it mean? This could be rest, right? Just a call to go inward, meditation, finding peace, analyzing thoughts and information, research, maybe contemplation, taking time to heal, setting up those temporary mental boundaries just to kind of reassess what is for you and what needs to be removed. I love this passive planning. So maybe just letting things go and being open to having the universe kind of orchestrate something that you're just frankly too tired to try to act on yourself. And I also like to think of this as just really, going inward and trusting yourself. The placement of these swords in the Smith-Waite deck is very interesting. So there's three swords just coming right down. And for me, I'm seeing this as, we could even take it as some chakras. So third eye, throat, and heart chakra. Okay, this can be very exhausting if they're, either not aligned or spinning, in their beautiful way that they should. And so we just have to take a pause to realign and get those in more of a healthy flow. But interesting, the hands being clasped or just in a position almost of prayer, facing up to the sword that's over the heart. It's like this connection to heart again. Okay, maybe I just need to pause for a moment and let the truth come into my heart space so that I actually know what stopping. We rush around. We're so distracted, especially everything that's coming at us all the time. And I am 100% guilty of this every day. But it's if I can just pause and sit and feel into it, be able to listen to my body. What am I actually needing at this time? That is like the best medicine we can give ourselves. And so I do feel like, yes, 4 is a very medicinal card.
That was some beautiful stuff, Jess.
Well, thank you. And then Jekanovia has notes of needing to sort your thoughts, that time of silence and contemplation rather than speaking and collaborating. Ooh, and that's a great point. Like, yes, take time away. This is that little mini hermit card coming out. Like, just maybe it's not a time to be working with anyone. Maybe that's part of the distraction. So refocus on what you can do about a situation. Take that power back.
Yeah, I find a lot of times we're so, and I want to say codependent, but that's probably too big of a word. But when something happens, our first instinct is, I need to call and bitch to somebody about this.
Right.
But maybe we need to break that habit and, think about it first, because maybe it's not what we think it is.
Yeah, or I'm just going to keep going, because as soon as I sit down and am quiet, then I have to deal with this. And so I'm just going to burn myself out, just spinning all my plates, because it's like, it's hard sometimes, or we just maybe feel like we're going to let ourselves down or someone else down if we take time to pause.
I love that you connected it with that, Jekanovia, because that's really making me think that I've been experiencing a lot of 4 of Swords this year then, maybe because I don't even think that anything prompted it, but I have noticed more lately that when something happens, I don't know, maybe it is forced. Maybe I do force myself to just sit and just think about it and like let it all soak in. And then I go and do the bitching. I still do the bitching, but that comes later now. Like, it's not first anymore, at least for the most part. That's a very interesting way of thinking about it.
When you process it first, your bitching is far more resourceful because, it's fine-tuned. You figured out what you got to bitch about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's not from that emotional place.
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you've come up with all the good quips to say about everything. You've got all the good jokes, the little bits of humor that you're going to add into the bitching. It's a good approach.
There's no regret later on in the shower going, damn it, I should have said
yes. When you just scream out, oh, and that's what I should have said. All right. So for this card, we've got Jupiter in Libra, and the title is Truce. And Jupiter is all about expansion and luck and faith and optimism, generosity, abundance. And of course, Libra, we know, balance, equality, peace, harmony. And so at first that really kind of tripped me up, because Jupiter being so expansive and yet this card really being a time of like quieting down and moving inward. And so I was like, maybe it's just a time of taking deep breaths. Like, we're just bringing ourselves back to that place of balance with Libra through expanding our lungs. Like, I don't know.
Yes. 1,000%.
Yeah. I was like, all right, what's a literal translation of Jupiter being expansive? How do I actually feel that in my body? Okay. Yeah. Just breathing. But maybe it's also about aiming to see the bigger picture of something, or increasing our ability to be open-minded. We are, maybe this card is about growing and developing through cooperation within the body, mind, and soul, and expanding consciousness through maybe meditation. Maybe if you're not used to that kind of quiet and silence, that is a path to some kind of expansion.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That oh, wow. That was just mind blowing. I mean, just the way you explained it. I mean, it's like meditation.
Yeah.
That's
right.
exactly what it's you're expanding your mind. You're expanding your awareness, your consciousness, your peace. So good.
Thank you.
All right. So some of the questions are, where in my routine can I add downtime? In what ways am I feeling the desire or need to rush or force things to happen? And what is the root source of this desire or need? What boundaries do I need to set for my own well-being? Am I looking at this situation from the right vantage point, or do I need to consider other perspectives?
I really like this one of what boundaries do I need to set for my own well-being?
Yeah. Actually, and it's funny, when Jess was going over kind of how the swords are positioned, I've never really noticed them over the chakras before. It's never become a thing.
Right.
And then, of course, that leads me to think, well, what else am I not noticing? I've always assumed that the swords are on the wall, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're hovering over the body, and he set those boundaries and saying, hey, you can't come in. I don't want your thoughts or your opinions right now. This is so. Thank you, Jess.
Yeah.
Once again.
That.
Well, even just like energetically seeing that as like your protective shield and thinking, how is it positioned? It's positioned in between the 3 of Swords and the 5 of Swords, which are both very contractual cards. And so it's saying that, I think that it's like this getting that protective layer on before we're heading out into the battle of the mind, the battle of the world, like fill in the blank. But oh yeah, Jekanovia, that is way cool.
It's yummy. God, I learned so much on this show. Such a good podcast.
Who are these
This is
podcasters?
such a good podcast. Man, we should rate this show. We should rate and review this show on our favorite podcast platform.
We totally should. Because a little birdie told me once that if you rate our show and give us a really good recommendation, we pull cards for you on the show.
What?
Oh, yes.
Oh my God.
Right?
That's a win-win.
Crazy.
Let's go do that.
Yes. Oh, if you're learning like we are right along with us, then share the show so that others can learn too. And I mean, don't even get me started about the beautiful stained glass that's also in the picture. I guess I've never really talked too much about that, but okay, so we're kind of like jumping around on this, but I think it's worth it because what a cool card. Like this, whenever I'm looking at stained glass in a church, cathedral, like wherever, it just something about it, the way the colors play, the way the light comes through, there's just something very calming, almost like this reprieve of chaos. And so I think that just adds to the reminder of that position. And then, of course, the sword underneath that we didn't really talk about, but it's like we are fully protected. We have guides. We have protection around us. We can protect our own energy. There's like resources for us to draw from, especially if we're in between very contractual places. And this card visually, I mean, Pamela Coleman Smith, well done.
Yes, bravo. I hope you're looking over us.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah.
Yes, and hearing all the praises.
I love your thoughts there around the stained glass, because as soon as you said church, it totally triggered my memory that even like, I mean, I used to go to church as a young girl, and I always felt there was like something that wasn't for me in that building, but I used to get lost in the stained glass that we had there. And it was like I think it's called the 12 Stations of the Cross, that whole thing. But they were all in stained glass, and I used to just get lost in that. And I felt like it was that was the only thing that I could sort of find joy in that building. So it always made me feel very calm.
And I mean, stained glass, I don't know anything about the modern way of doing it or in churches. I don't spend a lot of time there, but the art of, especially in, the ancestors' times, the art of stained glass is so intricate, and you can't rush it. You have to go slow. It has to be perfect and precision and planned out. And like, there's intention in every step. It's one of those really slow processes. So it fits exactly with this card.
Awesome. I love it.
All right. So we ready for the 5s then?
I guess.
I suppose.
I've been avoiding it. I've been putting it off.
We're like, so what else is in that 4? What do you guys think of this particular
I'm like, it
Maybe we'll
takes
do
me
the
back
5s
to
next week.
Paris when I was, the cathedrals, and wow. Well, we're just going to stop the show at 4 of Swords.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back soon.
Yeah. All right. I'll put my head down and just do it. Okay. So the 5 of Swords is conflict, a win, but at what cost? A time to recenter, regret, a mini devil. That's really interesting. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, sure. So this, once again, comes from when I was studying, well, not with Lindsay Mack, but when I was taking Lindsay Mack's course. She talked about this having some connection with the devil in terms of, because she also talks about the devil about being like these kind of negative spirals and these sort of looping thoughts that people can get into, and just those feelings of guilt and shame and just the spiraling that we do. And that this is kind of a a mini version of that. And this is more of a time when we can catch ourselves doing it and just say, okay, yeah, I fucked up. I'm ready to do better. Let's go. So it's not that, you know how when we were doing the this or that and you said the minors are really more that day-to-day energy. So this is just like the, you know, the microcosm kind of thing. It's not that big archetype of the devil.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, I always love that.
Oh, so good. Well, some of the other keywords. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I really, in the Smith-Waite deck, I really wanted to slap that smug look off the guy's face. That's not very spiritual and sweet of me to say, but come on.
Hey, that's fine.
Well, it's always had this really superiority complex feel to me. People feeling like they're smarter, more intelligent because of the swords, right?
Yeah, the gloating or, you know, after hurting someone.
Yeah, and like the intellectual ego kind of coming into play. And cheating to win, like you were saying, gloating, having an unfair advantage, and it's used in your favor with your knowledge. So, you know, using your privilege to beat out someone who's maybe more deserving of something. Like, to me, I know this is very influenced by me, this part, but yeah, I really am not fond of this card. So, and I mean, it brings to mind, like, the guidance of this card. If this comes up, it brings to mind in Bambi, Thumper the Rabbit. If you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. So there's a difference between telling it like it is and just being a straight up asshole. So that's the lesson of the Five of Swords. You're welcome.
I love that. I really like that connection a lot. I'm going to be thinking about that when I pull this card. All right, so we've got Venus in Aquarius for the astrology, and the title is Defeat. Now, Venus is our planet of love and beauty and values and arts, aesthetics, and she brings things together. And then we've got Aquarius, which is this very analytical and sort of abstract thinking sign. It's all about innovation and idealism. It's got some rebellious streaks in it. It can be quirky and independent. And again, this was one of those connections where I was like, all right, how is this even Venus? Like, nothing about this says Venus to me, right? But then, you know, I was digging deeper and I was like, all right, well, maybe what if this is like you're pushing someone's buttons and you went a little too far? Like you were trying to flirt, but it didn't work out, you know? Or maybe it's in a relationship, it's kind of like my way or the highway kind of thing. And it was in service of trying something new, bringing something new maybe to a relationship or to a situation, but it wound up being like, kind of your way or the highway. And yeah, it's like, it's maybe a win for you, but again, at what cost? And then I was thinking, you know, Aquarius can be a little bit independent and even detached. So maybe this was them thinking that there was something, they were doing something in service of the collective. But again, it just didn't go the way that they had hoped it would go. It could also just be some independence in relationships, and then maybe even just agreeing to disagree, because sometimes debate and differences in opinion are the healthy thing to do. So
yeah,
trying to give it a positive spin there.
Yeah, no, you did great. And really, for me, it's really just the impasse. It's like, okay, this just needs to, this isn't working. No one's gonna
walk away.
You just gotta,
yeah.
You guys have so much more tact than I do. I wanted to slap them and call him an asshole.
Well, some questions then. So 5 of Swords. If you're working with this card, maybe a question would be, how can I communicate my thoughts and feelings in a respectful, constructive way, Jekanovia?
Yes. Without name calling and slapping.
What are the peripheral effects of my actions and that they may have on others? Am I speaking from the heart or the ego? Is there an imbalance in power, privilege in the situation? How can I address this? And then, I think a third one would just be, is it time to walk away?
Yes. Hey, lovely listeners. I'll have you back with the Coven talking about the swords in just a moment. But I had to interrupt this episode to let you all know that we are going to be having our first ever book club episode this April. And if you're not following us on Instagram, which you should go do, we're at Tarot Coven Cast. I'll wait. Okay, great. So if you had been following us on Instagram, you would probably know that the book we are going to cover, voted on by you, lovely listeners and followers, is The Power of Tarot by Liz Worth. We are super pumped to be covering this book. And like I said, the episode won't be dropping until early April. So you've got lots of time to get your hands on a copy, whether or not you buy it, from your local bookstore, hopefully, or Amazon if it's your only option. You got to do what you got to do. Check out your local library. Maybe they've got a copy you can rent for a couple of weeks as well. No matter how you get your hands on it, make sure you get it. Make sure you read it so you can follow along with our first ever book club episode coming this April. Okay, without further ado, let's get back to the swords.
Well, I think we're ready to move on to 6.
Maybe we are
Yes,
walking
please.
away, or we're boating away.
Walking away from the 5 of swords into the 6. So, this card is really kind of about, yes, that action of choosing to not just like give up and slunk away, but it's more of like, okay, I'm actually going to make some change here and take responsibility for my actions. So this is a transition, leaving behind, moving on to something else, maybe being a guide or receiving guidance, the two sides of yourself. So there's the part that carries the grief and the part that helps you through it. So that journey of new potential and support. This could indicate a smoother road ahead, calming the emotions, the emotional healing through communication. And yeah, just overall, it is that message of change. And yeah, so much in here. I mean, symbolically that, we've discussed before in other episodes, but really, taking note of the water and the way that the figures are sitting in the boat, and just almost like with the swords kind of leading the way and how they're positioned. It's like, yes, our conflicts and things that we deal with come with us. We deal with them, our whole lives, but it's about choosing to continue to move on, even though they're there. Like, we're not just staying stuck, because that water is so fluid, and the boat means that we're traveling, and they're, the guide, they're taking us to that next place. Again, reminder that we do have the support within our circles, whether it is from the energetic realm or just, within our human space here, but that transition and moving on is available to us.
And this is at the very end of my astro notes, but just you talking about the water there, I have that like progress is made by making waves, because I was reading this take on the card that it could be looked at that you're moving away from something like this choppier kind of water, or you're the one that's actively making that because you're making the waves in order to get to this other side of, wherever you're going. All right. So we've got Mercury in Aquarius, and the title is Science, which I thought was very cool. Mercury being the planet of communication, thinking and learning and travel. And then Aquarius, again, it's analytical and sort of focused on innovation and idealism. It's quirky. It can be unpredictable. And it's this sign of fixed air. So it's kind of about maintaining communication or like further establishing an idea. And so to me, this is all about like analyzing how we move forward or seeking new perspectives, new ideas, new hope, whether physically or mentally. Solutions through new ideas, solutions through experiment. And maybe it's a collective or a variety of points of view that are needed to create a new vision. It's new knowledge that helps us move forward and away from outdated ways of thinking. And again, progress is made by making waves.
That's such a beautiful connection between Aquarius and Mercury.
Yes, I love it.
It's so, a lot to think about. Well, some of the questions that we have lined up are you a reliable narrator right now, or could you use an outside perspective? What outdated ways of thinking are you ready to leave behind? Who is steering your boat? Are you actively choosing your direction, or are you being carried along by someone else? How can you speak up or show up for those who need support? How can you hold space and lift up the voices of others? All right. So the Seven of Swords, key terms: fear of lack, a lesson in trusting that you have or you are enough, being strategic, too concerned with the past or the future, carrying someone else's beliefs. That's Jessie's interpretation. I'd love to hear more about that, actually, Jess.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes it's beliefs, but sometimes it's just people who feel like they have to carry everybody else's shit, like whether it's their emotional baggage or their trauma or their whatever they're dealing with, like it's their stuff. And I, as a mother, I will kind of use the idea of a lot of moms and maybe dads too. So nothing against our fathers here, but from my perspective, it's like you end up kind of taking on everything, whether it's your roles in the house and what you're doing and how you're helping the kids and, all the chores and, you're to the partner that you're with and maybe your jobs. And it's like so much that it's really about knowing what to put down that is not yours. And so while I've never really vibed with the whole this is sneaky and deceptive, I mean, sometimes that comes up. But when I see this card, I'm always asking, okay, because let's face it, we all can do a little house cleaning on other people's shizness, and just, again, through the years, I think we tend to take on things that aren't not ours. And we don't have the awareness of, we almost carry it for so long, we don't realize that it's not ours. But it's like, okay, we do have to take an inventory and strip off, let go, pull things out of the backpack, make things lighter so that we can actually work on ourselves or move forward or just lighten the load. And this card, when it comes up, yes, I'm like, ding, ding, ding. Okay. This is, we're causing some strain, some stress. Maybe we're exhausted. What can we let go of?
That's so interesting. I mean, that works even, obviously as a mom, I get that, but even like in a workplace, if you're carrying more than you're supposed to, eventually you're going to burn out and everyone else is going to look like, gold stars when really you're the one that carried everyone.
Yeah. Maybe it's like, it's time to delegate.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's such an interesting interpretation.
Note to self. And I am so guilty of this, but yeah.
Yeah, Jess, I can't remember what episode it was. Maybe it was the sticky cards, like way back when, but like you brought that idea to my attention. You've definitely gone a lot deeper with it today, but that really opened up the card for me once you said like, oh, you're just carrying shit that doesn't belong to you, like don't worry about it, let it go. That's just really totally cracked open that card for me ever since.
Well, thank you. And it affects our mental,
oh, yeah,
where we're at, our health, because it becomes so much a part of our stuff, our energetic weight that can keep us from feeling, joy. So yeah. That's why with that sword connection.
No, totally. And maybe that's why, the figure is still looking back as though like, okay, I don't even have my own stuff, or is still wanting something else because his hands or their hands are just full of shit that isn't theirs. And they're like, I want that stuff though. Like I want the stuff that's mine.
Yes. And he's missing out on the carnival.
Yeah. On the flip side, maybe it is the discernment. It's like, okay, I had too many swords. I had to put a few down. This is so funny. So I have this thing when I shop in certain places, I will literally be like, I'm not getting a cart. I am only allowed to purchase what I can carry. So we have like big box stores, like a Costco down here in the US. So I'm like, if I can't carry it out of here, I am not buying it. And
that really
if you're
limits
getting
you
a big
at a Costco.
pack of toilet paper, you really can't get a lot of Costco. And so it's very effective. But this is that, okay, maybe on the flip side, it's like, I've got to put a few things down. Okay, now I'm skedaddling to the next thing. But
yeah. And good. Looking at it from that perspective too, maybe it's about prioritizing. Yeah. Maybe he's looking back going, yeah, I can leave those ones behind.
Right.
Yeah. If you got to come back for them, maybe they'll still be there, but you really need to care about that now. About that. That was my little Freudian slip there.
But
that's so good. But so some other key terms for this card is holding yourself back, getting out of a bad situation in the nick of time, keeping your thoughts and ideas to yourself rather than sharing them, being unwilling or unable to be open and communicate, feeling as if your ideas and thoughts don't count or aren't valued. And it can also indicate gossip and deceit, maybe a leak. Someone's taking your information and sharing it with others, or they're mining for information while acting as your friend.
Let's talk about energy leaking. And even though this is swords, it's the mental spot. It's like, okay, what energy vampires, those, are in our lives? Maybe it's the narcissists that hang around, or just those things that suck our energy. I love that it's like a leak, and man, you got to just cut that cord and patch up that auric field and like move on. But that's an awesome way to think about the sevens. That's a new one for me, and I love it.
Yeah. All right. So we have the moon in Aquarius. The title is Futility. So again, the moon is our emotions and our intuition, and Aquarius is that quirky, rebellious, independent sign. So here we have kind of brain over emotions or logic over intuition, a division of self because of that. And I guess I should say, and a division of self because of that. Maybe we're too focused on anxious thoughts to remember our bodies. Why? We're overanalyzing everything. Maybe we have an instinctive desire for improvement, even though none may actually be needed.
I really like the way that you kind of brought the attention where you're focusing on those anxious thoughts and you're forgetting about your body. So it's still marrying that, the mental and the physical and the connection between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. Because it's like the figure's leg is moving one way, but his brain, his eye is still back the other way, right? So things are out of sync.
Very much so. I mean, even just there's not a lot of balance there. If you were trying to recreate that pose, you'd probably feel really awkward.
Yep.
Especially with all those swords, right?
Yes.
Okay, questions with the Seven of Swords. How might I shift my focus away from lack and back to what I already have? What do I feel I missed out on, and why do I feel it's so out of reach now? What beliefs aren't actually mine and therefore not my responsibility to carry? And maybe it's not beliefs. You can insert any number of things there. How can I build confidence to speak my truth? And where does the belief that my thoughts don't matter come from? Ooh, yes.
That's a good one.
All right. Well, the Infinity Eight of Swords. This one is an awesome card. There's so much here. So some key terms there. And I say awesome card because that's my own personal opinion. But let's talk about what this means. So self-limitations, restrictive beliefs, feeling trapped or stranded. Maybe it's practicing restraint. Or perhaps there's some blockages there. Writer's block, perhaps. Or maybe just the block of moving forward to something that you really want to do, but might be being held back by fear. Maybe it's a panic attack. And if that's the case, it's a good sign to make a plan of action for future situations like these. So can also mean being restrained or held back from moving forward by an external influence, as opposed to that Two of Swords vibe where it's really the choice, right? Also, the need to make the best of a shitty situation and a need to break free, observe what's going on without interacting. Don't react to others' opinions. Ignore the gossip naysayers. That's a Jekanovia right there. You can tell. And I love that one too. And I always love, again, going back to the Lindsay Mack, because this is kind of her thought process with eights. And I think it applies to every eight. We go into the eights one way and we come out of the eights another. So it is this mini transition here as we kind of end our numerological journey. But and I just think, again, with the blindfolds and the bindings, and it's like, okay, what is keeping us in this prison of sorts? But then being aware of like how powerful we are and what options we do have, even while we feel maybe a little confined or restricted.
All right, so we've got Jupiter in Gemini, and this is where Jupiter finds its detriment. So it is Jupiter, one of the signs that it's at home in is Sagittarius, and Gemini is the opposite sign of that. So it's kind of in a detriment. So it has a little bit of a harder time doing all of those expansive, optimistic, generous type things that Jupiter likes to do. And Gemini is this sign that's social and adaptable. It's quick thinking and witty, communicative, but it can also be a little inconsistent and restless. So, yeah. So like I said, Jupiter has a more difficult time kind of bringing its beneficence, as it's called, into Gemini. So when Jupiter is in Sagittarius, we see kind of great expansion, and Jupiter wants to see the bigger picture, but Gemini wants to focus in on those details. So that's kind of where we get into that, like, maybe it is feeling kind of blindfolded because we're a little bit, I don't want to say narrow-minded, but our focus is so narrowed. We can't see sort of outside. We can't see that there's a break in those swords. We can't see that our feet aren't bound together, right? And while I was thinking about this card, I was definitely thinking back to Samara, our guest from a couple months ago, and their take on the card, where, you know, you can still channel and you can still connect to your higher self, even when you are feeling restricted. And so maybe that is kind of a nod to this Jupiter in Gemini thing. Like, how can you still expand when you do feel that restriction? And I also think it's just an invitation to expand our thinking around a situation so we can begin to see that way out. You know, take some time to, again, take that deep breath, expand inwards instead of outwards.
So much expansion. Yeah, I think I'm starting to understand how the Jupiter and Gemini play into each other. Because Gemini they get focused on the little things, and then Jupiter is like big picture.
Yeah.
So I can see why there's almost that conflict of like, what do I do? I'm stuck here. What do I do?
Yeah. And that would feel really conflicting within yourself, right? And then you kind of just get stuck with all that anxiety, I think.
Yeah. And then there's your analysis paralysis. You can't do anything.
Totally.
Gosh, I love it. Okay. So some of the questions we have are actually, Jazz came up with a really neat prompt. I think this is Jazz, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So making a list of things that you feel are in your way or blocking you, and how many of these things are actually in your control. Start with addressing those. That's just, to journal that, it would be so helpful, I think, especially if you're in that analysis paralysis stage.
Yeah.
Very powerful exercise. I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and some other questions are, okay, so stop and listen. What is the truth that you need to hear about things or people that influence you? Do you have blinders on to the world around you, and why? In what ways are you allowing others' opinions or judgments to stop you? And this is actually also inspired by Samara, because I thrive on Instagram. They had an amazing interpretation of the Eight of Swords, which actually led me to this question. How can you rely on your senses and really feel into what's available to you right now? How can you use these resources to your advantage or to navigate out of the danger zone?
I really like this last question. So much inspiration from Samara on this card, like just making me think about the Eight of Swords. I think one of the scarier cards in the deck, like in just such a much more open way.
And that's funny because to me, it doesn't feel scary at all. It really never has. It's more been like a minor irritation or a temporary setback. Yeah. That's so neat how we just see the cards so differently.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So should we move on to the nines then?
Yes.
Yeah.
This lovely person in the 8 has broken free. So the 9, some of the key terms are anxiety, worst case scenario thinking, nightmares, fear of the truth, avoiding the truth, stress, lack of rest, hurtful words, birth and separation trauma. Jess, that can be like really good brain candy. Let's go into that.
Yeah. And this connects with a question that I know you had for me a bit later, which is to do with the bedspread on the Smith-Waite depiction that has all of these astrological symbols. And then I believe they're like red roses or they're some kind of flower anyway. And so this idea of this birth or separation trauma I got from an astrologer named Joy Vernon, who actually does, she has a bunch of articles on how the tarot and astrology really work together. And I will definitely link. I should have been linking to her website this whole time because she's definitely really been helping me just sort of research all of this and bring all of these things together. But she talks about, so I'm just going to read from her site for just a minute. So she says, to me, the astrological bedspread references the birth chart, and the emotional turmoil is an indicator of the birth trauma. Birth trauma is the pain felt at birth when the child is separated, literally cut away from the mother. And that like each of us experiences, or each of us carries this experience with us throughout our lives. And every experience of separation returns us to this initial state of exile. So then I started looking at the card in terms of maybe this is, it's a separation of an end of the way of thinking, or even a physical separation in some way. But I'll talk about it more in the astro section as well. But that's kind of the overview there.
That is mind-blowing.
Isn't that wild?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've heard of the separation trauma thing before, but I've never really heard anyone go into it. So that was really interesting.
Right. Yeah. And I love the way it's linked to birth and the birth chart, and how that's so inherent within us because we all went through that separation in one way, shape, or form. Like either way, we all came from there. Right. So
yeah. And both are imprints on us.
Yes.
Okay. So some of the other key terms, which won't seem quite as in-depth as that one now. So it can represent those million tiny little thoughts that niggle away and keep you up at night. Grieving in silence or behind closed doors. So maybe not reaching out for support when you need it. And more in a positive light, waking up from a nightmare, finding out that things aren't quite as bad as you thought they were.
I like that spin.
Yes. And I think Lindsay Mack also talks about this where like, so imagine a clump of clothes on your floor in the middle of the night. In the dark, they seem a lot scarier than if you just turn on the light and realize it's a clump of clothing. I mean, it could have turned out to be a monster, but at least then you would know. You know what I mean? Like you're figuring things out. Maybe they're not as bad as they seemed. Maybe they are as bad as they seemed, but at least things are illuminated now.
Yeah, at least now you know.
Yes. And you can actually move forward with that knowledge.
Going back to the worst case scenario thinking, there's so much in our minds. I mean, we can create the most elaborate stories.
Yes.
Go on and on about something, and none of it is true. None of it has happened. It's like it's always seems to be worse in our minds. And recognizing, the patterns there. And when we do that, just going like, oh, wait. Okay, nope. Going back to truth, centering yourself, having that mantra ready if you need it. But I have to redirect my mind. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, like all the time. Like I can run through 1,000 different scenarios within seconds, and it just keeps our brains just looping, and it's just exhausting. But again, it's not productive and not truth at the end of the day.
Yeah. All the time you spend worrying about something that's not going to happen is time you could have spent enjoying life. Yeah.
So I was listening to the Tarot Ladies podcast the other day. I think it's called Tarot Bites. I'll link this particular episode in the show notes because I can't remember exactly who she was speaking to, but I know it was a couple ladies. They were talking about using the Akashic Records and also using tarot with the Akashic Records. And I can't remember how they got to it, but they said something about, everyone has the power to do these kinds of visualizations, to see or to manifest these kinds of things, because we already know you can, because you spend all of your time thinking about the worst case scenario, which is the exact same thing, but just in the negative direction. And that blew my mind.
Yes.
I was just like, think how much you could do if every time you get into that worst case scenario thinking, you redirect and you start thinking about the best possible thing. I mean, how much power or empowerment you would have, or you could feel or whatever.
Yeah. So the last, I talked about the book, The Untethered Soul, I believe in the last episode, but it's very much that a way where you're taking stock of the conversation going on in your brain. recognizing that the voice is really just the roommate and you have to be the observer at that point. I mean, Jazz, what you were saying is like earlier, like I just take a pause, I breathe, I kind of observe. And then if I'm, I kind of build my case or I just recognize what I want to say. And this in the Nine of Swords, I see that so much. It's like, okay, we have got to be the observer here. And why are we reacting? What is the truth here? And yeah, that's a perfect connection again to, the roommate that is not necessarily true.
And also, I think just everything you guys are saying, it accentuates whether you're a witch or a druid or just a spiritual or whatever magic you practice. The most powerful tool you have is your mind. I don't care how much you spend on crystals and wands and pretty pictures. Your most powerful tool is your mind. So use it wisely.
Oh,
yes. Bruce Lipton says it is a biological supercomputer. Like there really has not been a computer created that's as smart as our brain, our mind.
That's amazing. Yeah. So it's just like you got to redirect into that more positive or whatever word you want to use for it, but use it for good. That's so cheesy.
No, we can all do a little reprogramming. It's like we need to defrag and
need a software
upgrade
update.
Our operating system.
Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Yes. Thank you. What is it? Aunt May from Spider-Man?
I think so. I don't know.
All right. So we are at the Astro. Yeah. Okay. So this is Mars in Gemini, and the title is Cruelty, which feels sad, but Mars is a planet of passion, desire, ambition, assertiveness, and it can even mean anger. Gemini, as I've mentioned, is that social, adaptable, sort of quick thinking, communicative sign, but it's also restless. So I think this is those two things together. We get aggressive thinking or communication, or maybe even verbal harassment, which I think, again, talking about shifting that, I think that can be transformed into something passionate or even inspiring, like even a self-pep talk to get us out of this place that we're in. Maybe it's a conflict between what we think and what we desire, negative self-talk or thoughts, and ones especially that spiral in the mind. And so going back to this idea of the separation, Gemini is pairs. It's represented by the twins, and Mars is a planet that tends to separate things. So again, if we're thinking about just the Mars and Gemini coming together, it's just about a separation. So as I kind of touched on before, maybe it's a separation with a negative thinking pattern or a way of thinking, or maybe it is coming to terms with the idea that, yeah, I think that what needs to be done is I have to walk away from this person or from this situation. And in that way, it's not like, I guess it can be traumatic, and it can be, it's certainly upsetting, but it's also not the worst thing. It's just, once again, facing those hard truths of the swords.
What comes to mind are magnets that just, the opposite side of the magnets that are just pushing apart.
Yeah.
Or thinking about something being completely just like ripped away. And, it is, or even just when we're growing, it's just those growing pains of like, the pain of that. But it has to happen.
Exactly.
You're the butterfly ripping out of the chrysalis,
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so some questions with our Nine of Swords. So here's a prompt, actually a prompt first. Do a gigantic brain dump, putting every fear, reminder, idea, thought, frustration, etc. down on a piece of paper. Try to get it out of your mind so that your brain doesn't feel the need to remember it at all. Similar to the Eight of Swords, make an action plan for the things that you have control over. For each item that you don't have control over, write down who is responsible for it and your intention behind the outcome, then perform a release ritual, spell for each item. And I love that because it is like you're taking the accountability, you're doing the practice. It's something that you physically are doing to kind of clean out the closet, I guess, of the anxiety and thoughts of your mind that are not serving you. So that's a beautiful prompt. And we could all do a little house cleaning. I don't care who you are or what you're dealing with. There are those lingering anxieties, traumas, just stuff from our lives that hang on. So do the clear out.
And then I would even suggest, like, if you can, like, if you're writing this down on those little slips of paper, burn the paper. Bring that Mars energy to everything in that positive way.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard of people when they can't burn something, they'll flush it down the toilet. So write it on toilet paper if you need to, depending on how you practice.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so question, what resources are available for you to help with your mental health or whatever is going on with the prompt in this card? And, it's thinking about, okay, we do have resources, counseling, books, podcasts, support systems, such as friends, etc. And then lastly, what exactly is causing you to hold on to pain, fear, or anxiety? What steps can you take to release from this? And I will say, I'm going to just put a little insert here. If you are prone to, let's take it on the anxiety side. If stress and anxiety is a feeling that you have quite often, this is just a manifestation of something going on that's not right. So it's really a heads up to do a check-in with yourself from that physical, spiritual, mental space to say, yes, what is actually causing the anxiety? Anxiety is the byproduct of whatever is happening in there. So listen to that and then deal with that root issue.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I don't know if it goes without saying, but this is the swords. This is the mental realm. I mean, if you feel you can't deal with any of this on your own, definitely reach out. Like, you don't have to go through it alone, and you shouldn't. So,
yeah. And there's free resources in Canada, the US, and Australia that I know of, and the UK. So there are free resources available.
Yeah. And I think we've linked them before, and maybe I'll just link to them again in this episode.
Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to think if I wanted to go into just the connection between, our Four of Swords. It's like, maybe if you haven't listened to that Four of Swords, pause, and you're now have gone through the 5, 6, 7, and 8s. It's kind of that, hello, take a that breath. You need to take a pause and deal with this. So yeah, it's definitely I think this is a card that is a red, like kind of blinking light, like, okay, there's something here. What can we deal with to move on?
The engine light is on.
Yes, engine light is on. Love it, Jasmine. And on that note, I mean, it's a good thing because we're at the 10 of Swords, which is here almost to the end of our swords journey, but it certainly is the end of the numerical part of this with the 10 and wow. Key terms for this card. End of a thought process. It could be a fresh start with thinking patterns, breaking a cycle of negative thought or beliefs, weighed down by thoughts, so no progress without a new approach, and knowing that victory rarely comes without sacrifice. Maybe it's analysis paralysis, where you're literally like stuck in a place. And when those cards get literal, maybe your back needs an adjustment from the chiropractor. You're dealing with back pain, acupuncture. So yeah, all the chakras are totally being skewered right here. So maybe you just need a good old fashioned Reiki session and get into alignment. So it could also mean that it is the rock bottom. You can only go up from here. In a way, it's just like this relief, right? We're at the end. This thing is done. This what do they call it? Like the goose is cooked. And yes, it can only get better. It could mean betrayal, being stabbed in the back. So honor the grieving process with that. Maybe it's allowing others' judgment to get you down. Maybe it's more about surrender, accepting things for what they are. Or it could be self-defeating thoughts that continue to just keep you stuck, that you just, need to deal with and work through in order to get up and move forward.
All right. So this is the sun in Gemini, the title being Ruin. This is the one that threw me for the biggest loop. I think the astrology correspondences for the swords were my toughest challenge for sure. So bear with me on this one. But the sun is our identity, our personality, where we shine. It's our life force. And again, Gemini is that social, quick thinking, communicative, inquisitive sign. And I did read this one take on it from an amazing astrologer named Austin Kopek. I will link to his site. He talks about how this is the last decan. So the decans there are 3 decans for each sign, and basically it's just 10 days within every season. So this card and the sun in Gemini would mark the final 10 days of Gemini season. So it's right before we hit the summer solstice. Because, of course, we'd be moving into Cancer, right? And so really that's just the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. And, of course, that's, themes that we've already talked about. But I really liked that sort of more technical, like behind the scenes kind of take on it. It could also be that maybe we're too distracted to see the new beginning that's ahead of us, because Gemini can have that restless, sort of distracted energy. Maybe we're even purposely distracting ourselves to avoid the ending. The sun's light is split and dispersed by Gemini's sort of airy, dualistic qualities. And so we need to go and seek harmony elsewhere. Like it's no longer working like this. And it's also sort of the end result of a restless and looping mind.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, when the sunlight is split like that, I mean, that in my mind is just chaos. And a sun itself is just this expansion of light and energy. And so, yeah, I almost think of like the mania that comes to mind with that.
Yeah. And I think that this card, on first glance, the connection with sun and Gemini is maybe some of those more shadow qualities of the sun being in Gemini, but the invitation is to kind of always bring back to balance, right? And find the sort of lighter side or whatever of sun and Gemini. So
finding peace in the moment. And you know what?
Yes.
As you were reading that, as you were explaining that, I was kind of just looking at the Smith-Waite version of the 10 of Swords. And the guy's sitting there, he's got 10 swords in his back. He's,
that's a nice way of putting it, Jekanovia, that he's sitting there.
he's just chilling. He's looking at the water. But I just realized he's making a peace sign with his hand.
Yeah.
I don't know why I never noticed that before.
He's just like, he's good to go. Yeah.
It's over. It's done. Time to move on,
Also, I will never, ever forget now that this dude is just at a day. It's just a day at the beach for this guy. He's chilling out on the beach.
He's taking in the scenes. He's enjoying the moment.
Just listening to the waves.
I mean, in a way, there is that sense of relief, right?
Yeah,
because sometimes you just need an answer. And if this card comes up, there's really not, you can't really wiggle around what the card's trying to tell you.
Yeah. It's like, I think it looks sort of that scary upon first glance for a reason. It's because like, that's it. Like, that's the end. To just go a different way, It's supposed to pack that powerful punch.
Well, and sometimes we just need our attention really like smacked, because if we're at the point of the 10 of Swords, we haven't been listening or really dealing with the situation. And so it's like the big old, there's your face slap, Jekanovia. I mean, the 5 of Swords didn't get his face slapped, but that 10 of Swords, he just took it too far.
Yeah, it wasn't me, I swear. Okay, well, some of the questions that we have lined up for the 10 of Swords. Am I resisting the call toward a new beginning? How might I shift focus to see the potential of this fresh start? I like those 2 questions actually together.
Yeah.
Because it may not be a beginning that we want or desire, but it's one that's going to happen regardless. So, how do I change gears here? In what ways am I in resistance? How is this negatively affecting my mental and physical well-being? How are my words and thoughts working against my efforts? Is there a relationship that isn't supportive of or healthy for me at this time? What belief causes me to accept and maintain this relationship? And what boundaries can I communicate with them?
That's a good one. What belief causes me to accept and maintain this relationship? I like that. Yes. That's really good.
Because something I've learned is it doesn't matter if you've known someone for 10 minutes or 10 years. That's not a reason to accept,
right,
abuse or disrespect or anything. So, yeah.
Wow. Awesome. What a journey.
We did it.
Jaconovia, I see you have some extra interesting thoughts. Did you want to bring those up?
Sure. Yeah. Just really quick ones. So in the Smith-Waite deck, of course, there's swords in some of the major arcana. So I was looking at it, and the Magician has a sword, of course, one of each of the elements. The Justice has a sword. So like for me, that's kind of the sword of truth. So it's showing up in other places. The Wheel of Fortune has a sword, like the Sphinx person, lion thing sitting at the top of the wheel is actually holding a sword. And for, again, the sword of truth. But I noticed all the other figures were reading books. So your sword of truth comes from knowledge, self-knowledge, awareness.
Ooh.
So, yeah. And people probably know this, but I still think it's cool. But the letters on the Wheel of Fortune is Taro and then circle back to T.
Yeah.
So the tarot is also the sword of truth. So whether you like the information that comes to you or not, it's still the truth.
Ooh, love
Beautiful.
that.
Yeah. And then finally, one card that I thought had a sword, and I actually went looking for it, is the Emperor, but he does not have a sword.
That is
which
interesting.
was surprising to me. So he doesn't rule by force. He's a cool guy.
I mean, he does hold something.
He's got like a scepter and a ball or a pomegranate, or I don't know. He's got something.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is either. That is very interesting. I think this may also come from, yes, it does come from Lindsay Mack, but she had talked about in our class on the swords, with the Ace of Swords, it having a lot of similarities, I guess is the right word, with the Magician, just in terms of like the beginning of things, of course, and kind of opening the channel and all that kind of stuff. So, and yeah, I guess the Magician probably has maybe a connection with each of the aces in a way.
I think so, because it's the number one of the or the major as well. So
yeah. Love it.
So much goodness.
Yeah. Thank you for all of those extra interesting tidbits. I loved it.
Yeah. Highly encourage everybody to put their swords, all of their sword cards out. Take a look at the story that's happening there. It's for anyone who's been working with tarot, no matter how short or long, revisit the full the story, the lineup of the cards, and you will always see something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you said that, Jess, it reminded me of like back when we used to be more of a meetup group and we used to do like exercises all the time. One week you had us like lay out the full deck and just take a look at everything that was happening. And that was such a interesting and rich exercise.
Yeah, just because often these cards are brought up by themselves, right? You're drawing a card for a position in a spread or, just a couple cards, but to see the full suit together, really, I think it honors the illustrator's art vision, but also the story between the cards is really just, there's always something there.
Yeah, and I think we often forget that. Like these, as much as we might use them in isolation, the decks aren't created in isolation, and the cards really do speak to each other.
Yes, they flow from one to another.
Yeah, it's almost like they have a conversation. There's a technique, I think it's called the movie technique, where you lay just random cards side by side and look at the scene as if it was a movie and you know what happens next. And that's
a great exercise.
I think a lot of writers use that actually to help, okay, what's going to happen next? Like, what is your protagonist up to next? Like, pull 3 cards.
Can you, writing a book just by using characters in the tarot, that would be so much fun.
Nobody steal that idea from Jaconovia.
It was
copyrighted. Okay, well, I gave it to you. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us this time. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another episode, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tarot Coven Cast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll be wrapping up our journey through the suits of the tarot. And until then, everyone, keep making magic.